You record. You do those.
All right, cool. Hey, Will, how are you doing today?
Good, Tom. Great to see you. How was South by?
South by was good. South by was good. It's always a good time here in Austin during South by, except for the people that actually live in Austin. They tend to dislike it with all the traffic and added congestion. But you know what? It's just part of the atmosphere here in Austin every year. So um, can't complain.
Anything
I enjoyed it. Good food,
notable?
good
Anything
people.
memorable?
Look, they had some pretty cool speakers there. Obviously, the conversation was a lot about AI and then how that new technology is going to kind of uh, push whether it's the economy, whether it's technology, whether it's creative movies, arts into a new frontier. But I think what was kind of interesting about the South by Southwest conference, and no, that I didn't really hear too much about is this level of uncertainty that we're going to see in the business world. And, I know you've talked a little bit about it and just understanding that we are going into unprecedented times, as cliche as that sounds, right? But it is truly unprecedented that we don't know what the future looks like. There's tariffs, they're on, they're off, people are buying, people are not buying, people are bullish. Now there's bear market discussions. So, Will, help us understand this a little bit better. Like, give us a view of what you think, what you see from your perspective on this level of uncertainty that's kind of cast a shadow around the business community.
Yeah, let's take a step back on like where we are for RevOps and sales professionals. You really had like the growth of the tens and the aughts through teens of like growth at all costs. The whole blitz scaling book that came out, the whole idea of being a rocket ship or a unicorn, and then it became like going to be a centurion, $100 million in profitable. And so that's all changed. And then we had the shift, crazy roller coaster ride of COVID, of just like if you had a SaaS product, you took off and it was just gangbusters. And you were figuring out, how do I staff up effectively, fast enough? And then you kind of went into 23 and 24. And 22, 23 had a downward slide. You
Yep.
maybe had to think about who does what do we do? And then 24 was 24. It's kind of like everyone kind of knew election was coming. Well, post-election, we have unprecedented uncertainty. We've got this mix of AI. We've got, as you said, tariff on again, off again. We got people vandalizing Tesla dealerships, which I'm sure you have stories about that in Austin. Then you've got, the Canadian marketplace, which part of North America, most CRMs and sales territories don't split out Canada and US. They call it North America. But now we're seeing like there's differences in opinions on, are you going to buy from US if you're Canadian? Like there's just a lot going on.
Yeah. 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 So that's interesting you mentioned all this, right? Because I think a lot of people see what you're talking about. They feel it in their business. So what are like some of the things, okay, taking a step back, what are you going to do about that? Or what are some tactics that or strategies that you would change today, knowing that uncertainty is here and we're back at it again, of not knowing what the next month or year would bring?
So I'll tackle this from a financial perspective and an
Yeah.
operator perspective. So in a financial perspective, we know like median ARR growth rates has shifted down from the like low 20s down to like the 15s and 14s on an annual basis.
Yeah.
That's a big shift. And so if you're talking about 6, 7, 8 point drop in median ARR growth across public SaaS companies, and then you see this shift up from a negative net income or negative cash flow to being positive. And so what we're talking about here is efficiency, revenue efficiency. And then operationally, how do you go about for a RevOps organization achieving revenue efficiency? And I know most people are thinking, like, oh, let me improve my conversion rates, let me get higher qualified leads. They think about it from a funnel perspective, or maybe thinking about it from like a territory. Let's go down from our tier 3 and tier 2 territories, focus on tier 1 territories. That's really kind of like tangible planning type approaches. But I think there's an operational question that VPs of RevOps and CROs kind of face with. Um, as they've staffed up over the past few years and they've taken on more planning, do they look at maybe reducing some of that high dollar spend and headcount and tools and shifting that back on finance? Because finance does planning with cost involved on a better than RevOps does. Or does RevOps, shift planning back to finance? Step two or number two option would be, does RevOps simply look to be more efficient with tools like AI tools or stuff like Clary for strategic planning or Anaplan, or maybe use Clay to improve data enrichment for better qualified prospects and leads? And so then that's the let's become more efficient, maybe the Android approach of like tech enabled, but your IT budget goes up, your tech stack goes up, your operating tax, I call it, of like, topic switching, different UIs to understand, like all that goes up. And so once again, the first one would be shift planning back to finance. Second one would be leverage AI tools. Or the third option, I think, is what you see people are talking about is trying to become more strategic. And that is building out a strategic RevOps function so that that function is close to the funnel ops, the sales ops. They can identify signals and build out marketing and go-to-market plans when they see a signal that has legs, and they can enter a new market or lean into a market that that marketing or finance may be too delayed on, and that strategic RevOps function is closer to, and they can redirect that way and overall be better at sales planning execution. So those are three kind of avenues I see. Love to get your thoughts, Tom, and whatever else you might think about the topic.
Yeah, so you're gonna say tools over, let's say, additional headcount? Okay, want to ask you about that.
That's a
Like,
good
so
phrase. Yep.
what did we do back in the COVID era? We would hire, 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 right? And we bought a lot of additional tools too, but like, is this now saying, hey, if I had an extra, I don't know, whatever, 100, 200K, I'm going to use that on technology versus, maybe additional headcount that we would have.
Yeah, I think tools over different headcount is kind of it's an easy trap to fall into because everyone is like they want to have a story about how they're AI enabled in sales or AI enabled in RevOps or AI enabled in go to market. Everyone wants to have that talking point, whether it be for the current job and meetings or for the resume bullet going forward. I think that as we see these AI tools become more focused on use cases, it's an easy fall into. I also think that it just increases the operational tax. I think there's been tech stack bloat over the years. And I think if you're going to do that, you need to be intentional about one, how you incorporate AI across the enterprise. And that's not being talked about because the AI apps don't want you to talk about AI data engineering. They don't want you to have a data warehouse where there's one consolidated location where you have a knowledge base and you have Copilot or Gemini or AWS Q, Amazon Q looking at the same location. They want you to stay siloed and say, use Clay and just stay all your pipeline in one area, or use Salesforce agents and charge you $2 a question and just try to fill in information there. So you have to understand the trick that all these AI products are trying to make you do, and don't fall for that trap, and actually have a enterprise strategy for how you incorporate AI into your business.
Yeah. Interesting. What if we were to tell the AI model, hey, your number one job is to make money? I wonder what would it spit out? But yeah, that'd be an interesting one to just kind of build out. But be more capitalistic, you know? Look, I think one of the things that we could probably do in these uncertain times kind of this goes back to some of the fundamentals that we've heard time and time again, which is, hey, focus on your existing customers, right? Really put in a lot of effort, more so than before, and don't take them for granted. So what does that mean? That means, hey, look, you know, don't feel like, hey, it has to be automatic with the QBR and I gotta give them insights because my manager's telling me to do it. No, like, hey, that current customer may be your lifeline for you to still survive in the next year or two, especially if they're up for renewal, right? So do everything you can to protect that renewal. Maybe not be as aggressive in trying to upsell them new products and licenses and try to grow it out. But look, if you could protect that renewal and that's enough to keep you afloat for a little longer, focus on that. Really, really put the emphasis, give your CS, your account management, your renewal team all the tools they need to ensure that they have a really solid conversation and that you provide great customer support, great success in the tool, great use cases. Because guess what? They may be your best path to gaining new additional pipeline in existing customers if you have a reference from them, right? Don't ignore them. Don't ignore the customers that probably even churned on you, right? Go back to them and ask them, hey, what can be done better? Right? What can we have done to earn your business again if we had to? Is it the price? Is it the product? Is it service? Whatever it may be. Like really focus maniacally on the existing customers that you currently have. Because I think they might be, particularly for those who are kind of tight with their wallets, they might be the saving grace. Because sometimes it's a lot easier just to do nothing or to renew as is than it is to dive into a whole new product as you talked about, right? Because that's risky, right? So
Well, Tom, let's talk about like it's kind of like okay, so if you don't focus on your core, you don't focus on your customers, then you're going to get into this place of like, oh, we're entering turnaround, right? And what's a turnaround consulting team going to do? The first thing they're going to do is to go talk to your customers who left. And what are they going to say? They say, I left because of budget and because no one reached out and asked me like what I wanted or what I needed. And so like this gets an idea of like RevOps is all too focused on uh, new business and segmentation, expanding within segments, and then building MBRs and QBRs and speaking intelligently about what's driving the revenue function. And they do a great job of that. And we know RevOps is overutilized, overextended, just burnout machine. But really, I think this move towards a uncertainty is going to shift RevOps um, into looking more at CS. As we know, over the last year, RevOps and CRO started to own net new ARR and started to own retention rates and retention metrics, but they didn't own CS yet. Like that was still a slow evolution that a lot of companies are going through. But I think this year you've got to see senior sales leaders hopping on, whether it be a Gainsight or Churn Zero or Gong, some sort of recording and management tracking of the CS teams and asking intelligent questions. And in that regard, these CS teams need to be incentivized correctly and not just a W-2 payment and not just like your annual 5-10% bonus. There needs to be targeted names to retain. There needs to be targeted quotas to hit. And it's what we're talking about is the continued over um, over stressing of the RevOps function and to get more into CS. And so once again, the VP of RevOps is going to figure out, oh shoot, do I staff up or do I use more tools? Or do I build out a strategic function and be more thoughtful about this? But I think you're dead on, Tom. You got to focus on who got you here, who brought you to the dance. And if they continue to look good, they're going to make you look good and help your customers be successful because that's how you're going to be successful for
yeah,
this.
I like also a nice little reference to the March Madness. What's going on with bringing, yeah, who got you to the dance, right? Who got you here? And let's be very loyal to them, make sure that they understand that we thank them for their business and we want them to succeed. Because if they succeed, we succeed.
So, Tom, how do you help your customers or clients with CS?
Well, I think number one, it's just really trying to think about, hey, look, that is a priority. Please do not push that aside and just give all the accolades and the focus on your net new sales folks, right? They are absolutely critical ensuring that you have a recurring revenue, particularly if you're in SaaS, right? That you have a recurring business model. And you're not always having to fill what they call that leaky bucket, right? When you're losing more customers and dollars than you're getting in. So just being very transparent and saying, look, they are part of it in on the front lines, just as your sales folks are in finding business and making sure that the company has the revenue that they need to continue on the next day. It's really surfacing a lot of the key metrics that maybe only fall within the CS or the post-sales realm that often get ignored and talked about. We talk about pipeline all the time, right? We talk about how much revenue we're generating, we talk about the attainment figures of their folks, but what about sales folks? Well, on the CS side, right? What does net retention look like? What does gross retention look like? How much are we expanding the business? How many of our, particularly if you have CS folks that are on some type of quota, how many of them are attaining their targets and such, right? And really highlighting, even going down to like, hey, look, let's celebrate when a CS person or post-sales person is able to get a marketing use case, a case study with the
That's
marketing
perfect.
team. That should be huge. That deserves a spiff, in my opinion. Like you
Yeah.
get that on paper, huge
Yes.
win,
Yeah.
right? And so like, things like that I think are, talking about, hey, when you're doing your pipeline calls, have you talked about what about the customers that left? Who's interviewed them? What about the customers that you've retained and renewed with? Who's interviewed them and who's provided what insights of that brought? Really getting that kind of permeating throughout the conversations with your organization. Those are simple things that I think, are probably table stakes and elevating
Yeah.
those conversations up.
But you also know they're difficult to make happen because you need to get obviously RevOps and a sales leader in the same room with marketing and then have a customer success leader who's pretty hands-on and knowledgeable about what's happening. And then there's value to having like a CS level frontline person there because to your point, I think one of the best things you can do if you're in customer success and trying to celebrate your customers is to find those marketing use cases. And then marketing, that makes their job easier. And also it gives them somewhere to look. Okay, what intents do we need to look for? What signals do we need to look for? What problems are occurring out there? And we already have a use case, a white paper, a case study, a presentation by one of these our existing customers. I think that's a great one to call out. But
Yeah.
making it happen involves getting the right people in the room, and also the same time of when you talk about your exit interviews, if you will, like there should be a slide on the MBR of like this was our churn this month, and these were their top 5 or 7 reasons for churn. Or top,
100%.
and just go through that, and then also at the same time, what are your top 5 reasons for renewals? Like I've not seen that on MBR. Like that would be a money maker if you're a
Yeah.
VP of customer success on here, is listing your top 5 reasons for renewals on a slide. And that way your marketing team and your CRO can then brief it up to the board and like, okay, we know our problem market fit, we know our product market
Yeah.
fit. Let's continue to nail this.
Yeah. It goes back to making that force field in Salesforce, right? Or HubSpot where it says, why do they churn? Why do they renew? Why do they grow? Right. And like, please, sales folks, don't just pick the first drop down menu, right? Write it out. It helps because guess what? That type of information feedback loop goes back to the organization, goes back to leadership, goes back to product, marketing, all that. And that's how you find that next customer.
While
So
we're,
yeah,
while
these
we're
are
still on the topic of customer success, what like because I'm in the data and I'm in the weeds, and I always ask for give me the admin, super admin permissions in your Salesforce and your HubSpot CRM, and they're like, all right, you're all set. And then I get over into their customer success, and it's often gain sites, and like, oh, I can only see like one layer of what I need to see. And then, so I say this because if you're a VP of RevOps or a director of RevOps, make sure that you have full visibility into what the customer success team is doing. And that often means you need to have the gain site module permissions turned on at various levels below even admin so that you get visibility at the object level, at the field level, or else you're just a director or VP and you're just getting talking points as opposed to inspecting what you expect. And if you can't inspect it, you can't do your job. So make sure you have that visibility.
yeah. More tools inside HubSpot.
Now, we
Sales rep.
all the
Oh,
tooling tech stack bloat has gotten ridiculous across all functions,
yeah.
and RevOps I think is starting to see it this past year with Clary and Clay, like I said, churn zero, gain sight, outreach has always been there, just too many tools. And often it's like, I just want to see someone show me on a napkin, how do you think about your day? Whether that be bringing in more pipe, whether it be increasing renewals, whether it be managing territories, show it to me on an 8 by 11 piece of paper or a napkin. And that's when you know someone knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever gonna get away from what do you call it? Over indexing on tools anytime soon, but we'll see. Maybe AI will hopefully fix it all. But no, this is a great topic. It's always kind of it's lurking top of mind of a lot of business leaders right now, and I don't think there's gonna be any clarity about where the economy and the business is going to be going anytime soon. So I think, with that in mind, you got to kind of always sit back and think about, okay, let's scenario plan this out. So what are the worst case scenarios that could happen and what should we do in those situations? So it's always a good topic to kind of,
Oh yeah, I
keep
think if
keep your
I
eye on, like to kind of wrap your head around because it's not going to go away. Not anytime soon.
I think your scenario planning topic was phraseology is dead on because I would be looking at what would a 5% haircut look like in Canada? What would a 5% haircut look like in Europe or Benelux? And like you just gotta just plan it out. And I know it sounds crazy, but what's that look like at a 5%? And what if it continues? Like you gotta have these scenarios planned out.
Yeah.
And that's down to like these VPs of territories. Or it's not just on the director of RevOps to do all this, and then the brief the VP of RevOps. It's actually on these territory sales leaders, and hopefully they have segmentation at the enterprise, mid-market, and SMB level, and they're doing the same thing. And so it really gets into an exercise, and it
Yeah.
would be something that I would say that most teams should be looking at here in Q2 as we enter Q2 of like what's that scenario plan look like? Let's have it in our back burner so that we have at least had the conversation. And if something happens, we see the trends, we can start put plans to action.
Good. All right. Well, always appreciate insights. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Tom. It's great.